Now, India's manufacturing story, it seems to have all the ingredients for global dominance. There is a booming domestic market. There are ambitious policies, Make in India being one, PLI schemes being another. And we have a workforce that is both skilled and cost-effective. And yet, here we are, in the year 2025, with manufacturing only contributing 17% to the GDP, which is far from that target of 25%. So what is missing in the Indian manufacturing story? What is holding us back? Industrialist Jamshed Godrej has this bold take on it. India needs to stop hiding behind tariff walls and start competing on true merit, he says. And he argues that Indian manufacturing is strong enough to withstand lower tariffs because competitiveness, not protectionism, is the real game changer. The challenge is quite clear. How do we scale up industries like steel and cement? How do we strengthen our supply chains and shift focus to export-led growth? Can India flip the script and use Trump's tariffs as an opportunity rather than a hurdle? Joining us to decode the great Indian manufacturing puzzle, our former ambassador, Ashok Sajjanhar. He's joining us along with the former Union Secretary for Commerce and Industry, Ajay Dua. And Raymond Vickery is also with us, the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Trade Development. Before we dive into this discussion, gentlemen, just listen in to what we got from Jamshed Godrej earlier. He was speaking at the CII National Manufacturing Summit. It sets the context for our debate this evening. Just listen to this.
India has always had high tariffs, right? Okay, why? Because we wanted to protect industry. What happened in 91? Okay, why did that whole system of deregulation take place? Why were tariffs cut? Why was the rupee significantly devalued? Okay, we have to be competitive. I mean, tariffs is all about competition. Today, industry is pretty good, very strong. Many companies, which are both global companies, Indian companies, everyone, and there are lots of them who are internationally competitive and doing a good job. But India is still tiny when it comes to manufacturing. One of the biggest benefits that China has is scale. So we need the scale also. Now, many industries in India have scale. Okay, the steel industry has scale, the cement industry has scale. So there are many such industries. Okay, but everybody should have scale if they have to be competitive. Actually, how you can be competitive with very low tariffs is really the challenge.
So Mr. Godrej is raising certain pertinent questions. If we are competitive, then why do we not have scale, the kind that China has? Let me come across to you, Mr. Dua. India has long relied on tariffs to shield its industries, but given our $165 billion in FDI and the government's PLI push, the question is, are we ready to drop the tariff crutch? Do you think that's possible?
Having me on your show, I think the answer is that we should have been ready 30 years ago. When 1991, when we decided to do away with the extreme form of protection with which we had experimented between 1950 and 1991, we opened up, certainly. We brought down our duties to some extent, but it was more of allowing greater imports into India, greater trade, moving items away from the prohibited list rather than making a conscious effort that we could become a part of integrate into the global economies only when we will become competitive. So I think since then, we have experimented, we have gradually reduced it, but still, we do remain high, protecting our industry,
yes,
both by way of tariff as well as non-tariff barriers. I am one with what Mr. Jamshed Godrej has said today, and he has said it earlier as well. He was with us earlier as the chairman of the National Manufacturing Center in Bangalore and
yes,
Center of Excellence, where I used to be also a member. We used to take this view saying that we need to become more competitive and do not rely on crutches.
yes.
Only then we would be able to grow our industry 25% to 17%.
Yes.
figures which you showed, that doesn't do us any good.
It doesn't do us any good at a time like this, where the pressure is building as far as dropping our tariffs in these bilateral talks, at least with the US and the tariff war, and its impact is for all to see. According to reports, Ambassador, do weigh in on this. India is now open to slashing tariffs on more than half of American imports. That's worth a staggering $23 billion. Like I pointed out right up front, it could be India's biggest tariff cut in years. Now, the talks are going to happen between the two sides, and those begin tomorrow. But are these cuts what Indian manufacturing can take on? What's your take?
Yeah, thank you very much, Vikram. I think what Mr. Jamshed Godrej has said, this would really be milk and honey as far as the government is concerned, because I think government has been always very keen, ready to reduce tariffs. Who has stood in the way of slashing tariffs is basically the Indian industry, because it's the Indian industry which has been, demanding protection. You would recall in 1991 when the tariffs were slashed and, when the economy was opened up, it was the Bombay Club that was demanding the protection that, we are, it's a nascent industry, we need tariff protection, etc., etc. So I think if the industry itself is saying that we are ready to face competition, I'm sure as far as the government is concerned, it will be very happy to do that also. And, we have seen that in recent years, Vikram, that as far as the government is concerned, it has been taking, in 1991, the reduction and the opening up of the economy was done under compulsion. Yes. It was done under pressure. But in recent years, we've seen whether, whatever the reforms that have been carried out, whether it is, you mentioned PLI, whether it is GST, whether it is IBC, all of them, they have all been done because India wants to engage, move forward as far as the reform process is concerned.
So, Ambassador, are you saying that there is no compulsion right now?
Helped us in good stead. That has, helped us,
Ambassador,
over the last 10 years. Yeah.
Sorry. Ambassador, are you saying that there is no compulsion anymore on India?
No, there is a compulsion as far as the United States is concerned. The tariff, reciprocal tariffs, that is the threat. But again, if we are going to do that, if the industry says that it is ready to face tariff cuts, if we are able to open up our market, meaning it is the 101 of economics, which tells us that lower tariffs is always good for the economy, good for the, competitiveness.
Yes.
And of course, it will help us to become part of the global value chains. That is what we really need to become, because, that is, even as far as our FTAs are concerned, we have not been able to take benefits of that, whether it is with the ASEAN countries or with Japan or Republic of Korea.
Yes.
Basically because, they have had low tariffs.
Right.
And we have not been able to take advantage of that.
Right.
And I think we really need to become competitive, to take full advantage and to become part of the global value chains. And that is what will provide us with scale also.
Raymond Vickery, do come in on this. The China Plus One strategy, it has benefited several countries, Vietnam, Mexico, several others. Why do you think India has not been able to capitalize enough? Like Ambassador is saying, there have been opportunities. We've got FTAs going, but we haven't built on those opportunities. Why do you think that is?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think the first point is to recognize that the economic relationship between India and the United States is very much a part of the overall relationship. These two largest democracies, and I'd say greatest democracies on earth, have so much in common in terms of values that we ought to be able to push economic engagement as a part of security, as a part of the overall relationship.
Yes.
Now, that having been said, we haven't been able to move forward on the economic front as much as we should because of protectionism and old-time thinking about infant industries and not wanting to be dominated by somebody from the West. I think that while this approach of reciprocal tariffs is really not a starter, because you need to be able to look at various categories, various sectors, that the overall point about lowering tariffs and having a mutually beneficial approach is the correct one.
Right.
We've been talking a lot about China. China is an adversary of the United States, and yet we have a much greater trade relationship with China than we do India.
Right.
There is a concept of friend sourcing, and India is a friend, and that's what we ought to be moving
But Mr. Vickery, under Mr. Trump, you have protectionism as far as American industry is concerned, and that's the entire approach. Are you saying that it doesn't work for an economy like the US? Because that's the kind of trajectory that India has been on.
Well, I think that there is a contradiction here. What we want to do is what the Secretary and the Ambassador have talked about, and that is compete and not retreat. Compete economically rather than trying to retreat behind tariff walls. The problem with the Trump administration, President Trump's approach, is that he seems to want to have it both ways. And that is that, yes, we want to be able to sell abroad, but we want to be able to protect our market and bring manufacturing back.
Right.
What is required is a compromise in terms of being able to have two-way trade. It's not the case that exports are good and imports are bad. And I would note that India has a trade surplus with the United States.
And it's
so
very
it
big.
has a lot of room to maneuver.
And that's the trouble area. As far as Trump is concerned, he's seeing red over there because of that trade deficit. But in terms of what we have right now going for us, Ambassador, or maybe I'll come to Mr. Dua and come to Ambassador after that. Mr. Dua, India is a top player. If you look at automotive sector, pharma sector, but to expand our stronghold in areas like electronics and chemicals today, where China is dominating, tell us, where is that missing link in our manufacturing mix right now? Because that's where the opportunities lie, don't they, Mr. Dua?
Yes. A couple of things are pretty obvious. One is what was referred to in the introduction by you, referring to Jamshed Godrej's comments. I think the question of scale is extremely important in order to be able to reduce costs. But you can do that if the market is large. If the market will be large to you, if you have trade relationships and you are not bogged down by reciprocal tariffs of the kind which are now being threatened upon many countries of the world.
Yes.
The question is scale, which means investments, and which means economic efficiencies can take place.
Yes.
Only when you are extremely competitive,
yes,
which China has become in a whole lot of industries, but the moment barriers come about it, then there is an issue of should one be able to invest yet not be able to reap the benefits of it.
Yes.
That becomes a problem. And number two,
yes,
one is scale. The second is, if we have to become a part of global supply chains, we cannot be by ourselves be able to achieve greater exports, become greater in scale, unless for a whole lot of components, intermediates, and even raw materials,
exactly,
we are a part of a supply chain.
Right.
But there, supply chain, getting into a global supply chain now clearly requires that it has to be based on competitiveness.
Correct.
Cannot join a global supply chain if an alternative source is available for a particular item in Korea, Vietnam,
correct,
or somewhere else in Southeast Asia.
Right. So you're saying the ecosystem needs to be holistic in nature. If you're going to build on sectors like electronics and chemicals, we need to have vendors that are going to support our manufacturing ecosystem. Do you agree with that, Ambassador? Sectors like EVs and semiconductors, renewables, These seem to be India's next big bets. But how does India ensure that we don't just assemble, but we actually manufacture and we do that at scale?
I think, right now, this is what the attempt and the effort of the government is. But, government will not be able to succeed unless the private sector moves in. As far as the scale in China is concerned, it was really got by the investments of the public sector. That is, the government had invested in all these industries. And it was able to sort of, create those big behemoths in terms of scale and able to produce and manufacture. We have stayed, as you have shown, Vikram, at 17%, although our GDP base has increased, but the percentage has stayed there. And our ambition and aspiration I've been seeing for the last 20 years plus has been that we need to move it up to 25%. So meaning this is a good thing that the GDP base has increased, but from 17% we needed to go up.
Yes.
Now the private sector will really have to see that they are willing to put in that investment. What the government can do, government can sort of get in as far as the FTAs are concerned.
Yes.
We have signed all these earlier FTAs. There might have been some problems with them. But of course, the new ones, whether it is with Australia, whether it is with the UAE, or it is, what we are looking at with the UK, with European Union, with New Zealand, et cetera,
Yeah.
I think those will definitely be able to provide us with good opportunities to gain access to those markets. And also, I am very strongly of the view that we need to go in for an FTA, whether it is limited, as was mentioned in Trump 1.0, or a broader, FTA. Discussions are going to start tomorrow with the United States.
Yes.
United States is our biggest trading partner, $190 billion. And we need to have preferential access into that market.
Yes.
As far as our own market is concerned, fine, what you mentioned about $23 billion, that is the tariff cuts that we are giving, but we need to see which are the areas
Yes.
in which we are providing those tariff cuts, not in those areas of agriculture where the farmers are dependent upon it.
Yes.
And it is going to have an impact on that, or small scale, medium scale, where, it is the employment of those people is reflected. So I think we'll really
Yes.
have to wait and see
Yes.
what are the areas. If it is high tech, I think definitely opening up and getting technology also inside, I think that will be a win-win proposition for both sides.
And that requires capex, and something that we really need to try and up the game on. It has been lagging behind, Ambassador, and capacity utilization currently is hovering around 74 to 76%. It does indicate underperformance. But I want to just ask Mr. Vikari, to be competitive in the American market, for Indian exports to the US to kind of take on the challenge, as it were, where is India lacking at this stage, according to you?
Well, I think it's perfectly apparent that in regard to India, there has to be a stability in terms of manufacturing. There have been numerous instances in which particularly there have been investments made that have then gone astray because of disputes. There needs to be labor reform, and there needs to be a stability and rule of law as opposed to shifting with political winds, because you have to be able to put into the Indian system some of the efficiency which the Chinese have had
Yes.
in their manufacturing operation. That doesn't mean you throw away democratic rights. It doesn't mean you throw away worker rights. But it does mean that you don't shift with every wind simply because there is a political matter involved. And with that efficiency, increases in the ease of doing business have been a major thrust of the Modi administration, and more needs to be done there. And when that happens, the competitiveness of Indian manufacturing will go up, and the ability to really increase manufacturing exports will be there. And I don't think you ought to have this conversation apart from the conversation about services. Services has been a very strong point of India, particularly in regard to IT-enabled services. And there is not really a difference in jobs in high-tech manufacturing, if you will, and in regard to services.
Yes.
And so the approach needs to be holistic. It needs to be on a focus on stability, rule of law,
Yes.
and efficiency. And then India has the greatest reserves in the world of people who are willing to innovate and work hard. So
Yes. Our startup
think,
ecosystem speaks of that story, Mr. Vikri. There's no taking away from that. And like you said, holistic approach. Our services exports have been phenomenal. And manufacturing can take a leaf out of that book because obviously if you have such great manpower, then you're obviously able to create the kind of technological innovation and the strides that you need to make to empower your manufacturing base. But what structural changes are required, Mr. Dua, to improve efficiency, to improve global competitiveness right now?
Vikram, I think we need to move away from a traditional conviction that we need manufacturing to create jobs. And that irrespective of whether that industry is amenable to labor-intensive processes or not, we keep saying that more and more jobs should be created in the mother industry or in the organized sector. And as we know, as of now, despite the 17% GDP, the job creation there is just 27 million in the organized sector.
Yes.
That's grossly inadequate. I conceded. But the way to go create jobs there is to expand the manufacturing, which can come about only when you lower your tariffs, you let the industry get technology from outside, free flow of technology, free investments coming in. Everybody will realize that India's greatest advantage, as was just mentioned by Mr. Vikri, is that it has manpower.
Yes.
And a manpower which is capable of innovation. It has shown it in services. Why can't it do it here as well?
Yes.
The reason I think it's being held back is without realizing that the moment the exports go up, the services itself will start creating the host of services which are required to undertake trade, transportation, banking, all the works will
But
come.
Mr. Dua, I wanted to ask you, as far as manpower is concerned, now we have AI coming in a big way. As far as the services sector is concerned, now there's a big question mark on how we could see disruption because of AI. Isn't that another cue for us to build on our manufacturing?
Yes and no is the answer, whether AI would really disrupt the employment scene. It was said that about computerization itself in the 90s when we opened up and we let computerization take place in the country. Railways, etc., had actually come in computerized in the 80s, the LIC even earlier. We have not seen much of employment disruption or reduction merely because we allowed these technologies to come in. I am optimistic that AI, yes, could divert from one set of services, but another set of services would come up related to activity. And on the whole,
yes,
the advantage of India in terms of manpower,
yes,
skilled manpower capable of innovation,
yes,
entrepreneurship will not go away. We should be nurturing it rather than fearing that new technology will be disrupted.
Ambassador, do weigh in on this, because as far as creation of jobs is concerned, it's a huge area as far as the opportunity is concerned when we are saying that we need to empower our manufacturing base and build on our export potential on that count. Here is a great potential, but has the Indian dispensation concentrated too much on building on the domestic needs rather than building an export-oriented manufacturing sector. Is that what is holding us back from reaching our target of 25%?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, Vikram, that you make, that, our market is very large. And I think we should really be taking advantage of it rather than sort of, taking refuge behind it, to not do anything. And as I was saying earlier, that this government we've seen over the last many years, last 10 years, that it is willing to take, bite the bullet in terms of reforms, not because it is, it has its back to the wall, but it wants to get reforms done, and because that is the only way to move forward, that is the only way to expand your economy.
Right.
And you would have seen that, when we've been speaking about a 5 trillion economy, we've said out of that 1 trillion would be, contributed by exports. So I think exports is a very important element.
Right.
20% of the total GDP, coming from exports. So it's a very important element.
Yes.
But I would tend to agree with both what Mr. Dua has said, that, we shouldn't be afraid of AI, because if AI cuts jobs in one sector, it definitely is going to produce jobs in other sectors. We have to sort of, reskill, and we have to diversify. That,
right,
I think, is the way forward.
So, Mr. Sajjanhar,
aspect is
yes,
one very last point.
Sure, go ahead.
The real thing, what we really need to do is get into reforms.
Yes.
We did not succeed on agriculture reform, land reform, labor reform. I think that is the way to go forward, and that is what is, will release the energy to move forward in the area of manufacturing also.
That's true, that's true. But now, if I have to wrap up this discussion, I want very quick takes from you, starting with you, Mr. Dua. One sector where India, you think, can dominate globally in the next 5 years?
Engineering industry. Now, engineering diversifying into electronics as well. So I would club it, engineering and electronics.
Ambassador, would you say India is over-reliant on policy incentives like PLI?
No, not really. I think that is a necessity that has to be there. But as far as the private sector is concerned, it needs to be, on its own also.
Right.
And see the opportunities both for the huge domestic market and the exports, and to focus on that.
Mr. Dua, how soon do you think India can manufacture its own semiconductors at scale?
Well, that's a $1 billion question, if not a billion. I should be saying that. Yes, there are a whole lot of aspects in semiconductor manufacturing. We would make progress in some aspects of it, and we might even be able to produce the semiconductors, not really the real nano ones or the state-of-the-art using ones, but the ones with larger, what they say,
sure,
60 nanometers,
yes,
or 80 nanometers. Some of those we might be able to make fairly soon.
Right.
And the government has pitched itself rightly on that track by saying we should be able to produce, but they would be of wider usage,
yes,
but not necessarily.
Well, agility is the need of the hour, it would seem, because you see the kind of pressures and the opportunities that lie before us, but we have to be very quick on the uptake. But Ambassador, one immediate reform that you think would make India an export powerhouse?
I think basically in terms of if you're able to get our land reform and labor reform, I think both of these are critical to our moving forward and making a very significant difference.
Fair.
As far as our economic growth prospects are concerned.
And Mr. Vikri, I'll come to you for the last one. Do you think India can ever beat China in cost effectiveness?
Absolutely. There is no reason in the world that India can't be number one in regard to that. But it takes this holistic approach. You have to look to the future. You have to take a page out of the success that it had in IT-enabled services.
Yes.
Don't, like a great football player, don't look where the ball is now. Look where the ball is going to be.
Right.
India has the ability to do that and to leapfrog. India is ahead of China in terms of some areas of innovation, and China has its own problems in
Yes, it does.
stagnation. So there's no reason to be pessimistic about that at all.
Well, it's clear that India's manufacturing story is at a crossroads. The government's policies, they've built a strong foundation, but now it's about execution. Are we going to seize the opportunity of global supply chain shifts, or will we get left behind in this entire tariff debate? One thing is for certain, tariffs are just a tool, not a long-term strategy. Competitiveness, scale, innovation, these are the real battlegrounds. A huge thank you to my guests, Ashok Sajjanhar, Ajay Dua, Raymond Vikri. Thank you for joining us with your insights on India Tonight. The India manufacturing story is still being written, but will it be a bestseller or a missed opportunity? That's the story we're after. We'll take a small...
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.